Hey guys. Tonight, we're traveling somewhere you didn't expect. Deep into the ink-stained, candlelit bureaucracy of the Byzantine Empire. It's early morning in Constantinople, and you're trudging along a stone corridor that echoes with the sound of sandals, sniffling clerks, and the occasional sneeze from someone allergic to vellum. You carry a bundle of scrolls that smell faintly of old sheep and rose oil. Somewhere above you, the imperial court is deciding matters of war and theology. But you'll be filing paperwork for the next 12 hours. That's your fate. And honestly, you probably won't survive this level of tedium without nodding off first. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love knowing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the light. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in the chancery is cool, but dry parchment weather. As Gregor says, he's your desk neighbor, always early, always whispering things like the emperor's breath smells like onions under his breath. You nod to him as you step into the room. The walls are lined with pigeonhole shelves stuffed with scrolls, most labeled in handwriting so beautiful it's practically illegible. Your desk is still there. That's a good start. It's narrow, uneven, and just wide enough for a scroll, an inkpot, and exactly one elbow. You notice someone's borrowed your chair, again slightly warm, and now creaks ominously when you sit. A petty crime, but one you'll quietly avenge later by misfiling one of their reports under miscellaneous fiscal humor. Outside, the city is waking up calls from market vendors, the shuffle of hooves on cobbled streets, the distant clang of a bell signaling the 6th hour. But inside this room, time seems syrupy, almost still. First task, unseal a bundle of scrolls wrapped in cord and wax. Their routine correspondence from provincial governors. One's about a dispute over goat manure storage. Another asks whether purple dye tax applies to funeral robes. You sigh gently. This is not a day of revolutions. You fumble a little with your seal knife, still half asleep. The wax is brittle today, maybe because the storage room was colder than usual. It flakes as you pry it up, sticking to your fingers like tiny bits of scarlet gravel. You remind yourself not to scratch your eye last time. You walked around with red wax stuck to your eyelid for hours before someone told you. The first scroll smells faintly of cinnamon and mildew, and the handwriting belongs to Demetrios, governor of somewhere forgettable. You begin to transcribe his complaint, something about barley shipments being delayed due to local ghost rumors. You pause. Ghost rumors. You whisper. Gregor leans over and shrugs. Could be banshees, he says, or just merchants trying to skip taxes. You make a non-committal sound and keep writing. Historians still argue whether provincial governors in the later Byzantine period were actually expected to enforce imperial edicts, or simply report chaos with enough calligraphy to distract from their failure. What is agreed on is that every letter from them arrived late, barely legible, and coated in at least one layer of unnecessary drama. You sigh again, reaching for the seal ledger. Each response must be stamped with a proper insignia. Yours is a dull brass cylinder with a chipped phoenix motif. Not the most prestigious, but it's better than Gregor's, which features a bird so poorly etched it looks like a confused goose. You apply the wax seal with just the right pressure, press it into the drying blotter, and slide the scroll into the outgoing morning basket. Already halfway full. At this point, someone sneezes behind you. It's the new hire, a pale kid from Thessaloniki with ink stains on both sleeves and a look of deep regret in his eyes. You all had that look once. He asks where to find the margin. Ruler. You point vaguely toward a stack of tablets near the water basin. He walks off in the opposite direction. You turn back to your next scroll. It's from the Imperial Mint, confirming shipment of 14,000 bronze falls to a garrison in Cappadocia. You notice with a kind of resigned interest that they've spelled Cappadocia 3 different ways on the same page. You correct them silently. You dip your quill into the ink, but the well is drier than you expected. You glance at Gregor. He shakes his head. Ink ration is lower this month, he mutters. Budget cuts. You pull the emergency ink pot from the bottom drawer. It smells like licorice and despair. You settle into the rhythm of it. Read, transcribe, seal, blot, stack. It's mind-numbing in that oddly peaceful way, like rowing a boat across a still lake. Knowing you're not going anywhere, but at least you're floating. Somewhere down the hall, a scribe coughs in triplets. You wonder briefly if that's his signature style. The room brightens with morning sun. Dust motes float through the air like tiny parchment fairies. You try not to breathe them in. Just as you're about to begin, scroll number 5. A courier enters. Out of breath, holding a box with ribbon. Everyone turns. Something urgent, he whispers. The courier announces with absolutely no urgency that this is a revised version of yesterday's decree about grain storage. Taxation in Thrace. Apparently, someone forgot to include paragraph 7b, which defines storage as any container larger than 1 amphora. You groan softly. You take the scroll, bow with only slight sarcasm, and return to your desk. Scroll number 5 is no more. Scroll number 5 has become scroll number 5.1 with addendum, clarification, and possibly 3 contradictory footnotes. Gregor is humming again. Something wordless, repetitive, and just off-key enough to irritate without warranting formal complaint. You let it blend into the ambient rustle of parchment and scratching quills as you reach under your desk for the sash deep blue trimmed in gold thread. Time to put on the uniform properly. The dress code for a mid-tier imperial bureaucrat is best described as ceremonial discomfort. Your tunic is thick linen, dyed a shade of off-white that scholars argue may have once symbolized honesty or possibly just mildew resistance. The robe over it is deep green, a color reserved for fiscal administrators, and covered in tiny stitched lions, each snarling in different directions, like they just read your salary slip. You tie the sash with the required 3-loop knot and pin your brass phoenix seal to your chest, exactly 2 fingers below your collarbone. Any higher and the archivist complains. Any lower and you get mistaken for a tax collector. Again, you catch your reflection in the polished bronze panel mounted near the entrance, a gift from some long-retired prefect. You look exactly like what you are, someone destined to die quietly. Under a mound of stamped papyrus, there's a hierarchy here, unspoken but universally understood. Ink color is status. You use brown, black, the mid-level, middle salary shade. Gregor uses the same, but he adds a drop of fig juice to make his scrolls smell nice. Above you, the elite scribes use dark purple, ink reserved for imperial correspondence. Below you, faded charcoal, barely visible unless read by candlelight. Nobody talks to those guys. Historians still argue whether Byzantine dress codes functioned more as social markers or bureaucratic camouflage. But what's clear is that robes, inkpots, and ring seals spoke volumes, often said, "Don't promote me. I value my sanity." You glance at the newbie again. His sash is on backwards. You think about telling him, then don't. Today's robe itches more than usual. Probably the humidity. Or maybe the fact that the laundering service swapped out the inner lining with something closer to a discarded potato sack. You shift slightly in your seat, trying to find the least scratchy configuration. There isn't one. A junior scribe millennian, from legal interpretations, passes by holding a stack of imperial property disputes. You nod, she nods. Nobody says a word. You're not sure if you like her, or if the silence is just comforting. Then, commotion, that the door creaks open, and in walks a man whose robes are so heavily embroidered you can barely see the fabric underneath. Gold thread, crimson trim, and a seal the size of a baby's fist. He smells like saffron and self-importance. Everyone pauses, not out of respect, out of logistical concern. He takes up a lot of hallway. This is Theophilos, head of record consolidation. No one knows what that means. Possibly not even him. He has a loud voice and a habit of quoting old decrees no one else has access to. Clause 17 of Basil's third revenue reform, he booms, now apropos of nothing, clearly states that all tax scrolls must be folded vertically. You're not even working on taxes today. But you nod anyway. He hands Gregor a scroll. Gregor reads it, blinks, and hands it to you. It's a revised format for documenting grain movement through the Bosphorus. You have to change your headers. Again, that's the 4th revision this month, you mutter. 5th, Gregor corrects. But who's counting? The answer, unfortunately, is you. You reach into your drawer for the alternate header stamps. There are 3, imperial confirmation for internal use, and this scroll has been revised due to recent clarifications. You pick the last one. It barely fits on the scroll's header line, so you use a tiny brush and hope no one notices the uneven spacing. just as you're finishing. A fly lands on the wax seal. You sigh. It's going to be that kind of day. Lunch arrives early. Not because it's time, but because the food clerk wants to avoid the noon rush. He leaves behind 2 clay bowls and some bread. One bowl is lentils with vinegar. The other is vinegar with lentils. You let Gregor choose first. He takes the lentilier of the 2. You chew slowly. It tastes ... warm. That's the nicest thing you can say. Across the room, the newbie is trying to open a jar of ink using both hands and his sleeve. It slips. It doesn't fall. Drop a purple blot, and you're accused of impersonating royalty. Drop a black one on someone else's document, and you'll be rewriting the whole scroll while pretending not to cry. You return to your desk. The scroll you were copying is gone, replaced by 2 others. You blink. Gregor shrugs. They said your assignment was reprioritized. Reprioritized is bureaucrats' peak, for the courier dropped something, and now everything is out of order. You readjust your papers, pick the one on top, and begin reading. It's a letter from a monastery near the Syrian border. The monks are requesting clarification on whether chickens count as taxable livestock. The response must include a legal citation, an updated livestock inventory form, and a chicken illustration for clarity. Theophilos insists. You sigh again, this time audibly, as you sketch a lopsided bird in the margin. A pigeon lands on the windowsill. It stares at you like it understands. You stare back, wondering whether you could train it to do your filing. Probably not. But maybe. Downstairs, the bells ring for the 6th hour. Time is officially halfway gone. Emotionally, you've been here since Justinian's first decree. A supervisor walks by with a thin smile. You return it. In this office, smiles are a performance brief, non-committal, and always delivered with eyes that say, I remember when we had chairs with cushions. You look at your to-do stack, then at the completed tray. They are both somehow larger than they were this morning. It's best not to think about it. The 3rd scroll on your desk is misleadingly slim, sealed with a faded green cord and stamped with a copper sigil. You vaguely recognize something to do with livestock regulation. You break the wax carefully, just in case it's one of those that shatter dramatically and trigger a shower of dust and public embarrassment. It doesn't. The scroll unrolls smoothly. A dispute over sheep grazing rights. Classic. It's from a town in the Anatolian plateau. Population, mostly sheep, plus 3 tax collectors, a bishop, and a particularly vocal cheese merchant. Apparently, 2 herders are fighting over who owns a patch of grass near a holy spring. One claims divine intervention. The other has diagrams. You already know this one's going to be complicated. You reach for your land use, agricultural, livestock related response form. It's been updated 3 times in the last year. You pull version 7 billion current as of 6 weeks ago. Unless someone changed it again yesterday. Wouldn't be the first time. First, you need to cite the imperial edict on rural land access issued under Emperor Romanos Historians still argue whether this edict was actually enforced, or just a polite suggestion paired with some well-dressed threats. Either way, it exists, and you copy the reference line dutifully. You pause. The scroll mentions a second issue. The holy spring is now a pilgrimage site for a local religious faction that may or may not be heretical. There's no official position. Yet, because nobody wants to offend the cheese merchant, who donates generously to the Urban Aqueduct Fund. This is the Byzantine Empire in a nutshell. Religion, bureaucracy, and dairy-based diplomacy. You draft two versions of your reply, one neutral, one safely vague. You'll decide later which to send, depending on whether the bishop signs off or disappears for another month-long retreat. Outside, the light shifts. Thin rays of sun hit the dust-filled air, casting sleepy gold across the room. You catch Gregor mid-yawn, trying to disguise it as a dramatic sigh. It almost works. You sharpen your quill, slowly, thoughtfully. Sharpening is a sanctioned break. You take the full 2 minutes, relishing the scrape of blade against red. The new tip looks promising, then disaster. You dip into your ink pot and gad, nothing. Dry, bone dry. You hold it up. Shake it a little. Gregor eyes you. I warned you this morning, he says, not unsympathetically. They cut the rations again. 1 pot per person per 2 days now. You resist the urge to hiss. Instead, you open your drawer. The emergency ink pot is gone. Someone borrowed it. Left a note. Sorry, urgent monk dispute. Will return before sundown. Melania, you grimace. That ink pot had personality. It smelled faintly of olives and failure. It was yours. You stand. The ink cart is near the scriptorium entrance. You walk slowly. There's no rush here, only a careful, rhythmic decay of time. As you pass Department B, a low murmur drifts out. You catch phrases, folded wrong, notarial insult, and basilisk imagery, unclear. You do not make eye contact at the cart. You find 2 ink flasks, one labeled standard black and the other black contaminated use. Only if desperate, you take the contaminated one. You're desperate, but not dramatic. Back at your desk, you test the ink. It's a little watery, with a scent like someone mixed in rosemary and regret. It'll do. You return to the scroll. The sheep diagram, for some reason, includes labels like Jeffrey and Gregory for the animals. You consider relabeling them Sheep A and Sheep B, but the personal touch is kind of charming. You leave it in dot. At the bottom of the scroll is a hand-drawn map, utterly indecipherable. A hill, a spring, a loaf of bread. You copy it anyway and add a note. Per our guidelines, territorial boundaries around natural springs shall defer to ecclesiastical interpretation unless otherwise disputed by the Office of Hydrographic Affairs. It's a sentence that means absolutely nothing, and yet everyone will nod solemnly when they read it. That's the magic of your job. Gregor slides a scroll onto your desk. This one's yours. Said something about how you're the grass expert. He chuckles at his own joke. You read the title on the acceptable width of pasture borders in contested terrains. Of course, this one references a border conflict between two monasteries over a shared cow path. One side argues that their cattle walk with more reverence and thus deserve more room. The other insists that reverence is irrelevant when droppings are involved. Historians still argue whether monastery feuds had any meaningful resolution, or if they served more as spiritual venting mechanisms paired with tea. You flip through the attached witness testimonies. One monk claims to have measured hoof prints by candlelight. Another insists divine revelation confirmed their property line during a thunderstorm. It's going to be a long afternoon. You file the sheep scroll. Label rural livestock conflict religious complications. You place it gently in the outbox. The scroll slides sideways. The tray is overfilled. You press it flatter with your palm. It crumples slightly. You pretend not to notice. You move the cowpath dispute to the pending high absurdity pile. Just then, pigeon flaps in through. The window lands on your shelf and drops off a small scrap of parchment tied to its foot. You take it. It's from Melanian. Borrowed your ruler. Will return soon. Also, bring lentils next time. You sigh. Again, Gregor looks up. What now? She has my ruler, and my ink, and my patience. He nods. That's bureaucracy. You both return to your work. The afternoon stretches ahead like a scroll that won't end. You lean back slightly, just enough to let your spine crack in 3 different languages, and you glance over at the wax seals tray. It's going to be a sealing kind of hour. You reach for the metal. Stamp your department's mid-tier brass insignia. Warm it in your hand. The phoenix on its face is worn thin from overuse. Its left wing has been flattened into something resembling a worried fish. You dip it into the wax with care, angle it just so, and press it into a red blob beside your signature. Satisfying, almost artistic, and now 37 more to go. This stack of scrolls just delivered by a courier with a suspicious limp needs to be reviewed. Signed and sealed before the 7th hour. You don't ask why. You never ask why. The last time someone asked why, they got reassigned to the basement scroll recataloging initiative. No one's seen them since. First up, a trade agreement between 2 villages, arguing about the exact ownership of a cherry orchard. You skim the opening line. Let it be known that the border of said orchard is hereby defined as extending to the tree that leans westward in the presence of wind. You stare at it. This could mean anything. Still, you don't make the rules. You just seal them. You scribble your approval. Check for the correct introductory formula by the will of his radiant authority. Blessed be his taxes, and melt the wax. Red for property, green for agricultural revisions, purple for, oh wait, you're not authorized for purple. You almost reach for it, out of habit. Gregor catches the motion and raises an eyebrow, feeling ambitious. You grunt in response. Purple wax is reserved for high-level edicts and birthdays involving the imperial family. You still remember the drama when someone used it on a bakery dispute. That scribe had to rewrite scrolls for 3 weeks by candlelight. As penance, you reach for the green wax instead. Melt, stamp. Cool, repeat. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine sealing system was more about security or pageantry. Some say it was a symbol of legitimacy. Others suspect it was simply a very elaborate way to waste time and terrify. Through scroll number 5, you realize you've sealed it with red instead of green. You freeze. You look around. No one saw. Or, if they did, they're pretending not to. You scratch out the label gently and apply a thin green blotch over it. It looks deliberate enough. You whisper a quiet prayer to Saint Euphemia, patron of minor clerical errors. Next scroll. An update to a previously updated revision of a tax relief petition. It references a decree from Emperor Constantine VII that's been interpreted 17 different ways, depending on the phase of the moon and which monastery was doing the reading. You double-check the formula with utmost grace and tedious consideration. The crown sees fit to acknowledge. You pause. The wax smells odd, like lavender. Someone's tampered with the wax stock, again probably Melanian. She has this theory that scented wax makes documents feel more merciful. You don't disagree, but you still file a quiet mental complaint. Across the room, a junior scribe knocks over his candle and yelps. Wax spills. Fortunately, it misses the scrolls and lands directly onto his foot. You hear him mutter a very non-canonical curse. Gregor doesn't look up. First burn of the day, he says. Not bad. You return to sealing. Somewhere around the 9th document, you enter what you like to call seal fog. Your brain softens. Time loses its edges. You stamp by muscle memory. Everything smells like melted bees and parchment. You begin to notice patterns. Certain governors always use the phrase with utmost deference. One bishop's scribe loops his lowercase betas like tiny fish. You start to identify documents by their smell, texture, or the emotional tone of their opening greeting. Then it arrives. A scroll with 3 seals already on it: purple, gold, and white wax. It's marked for immediate archival. This is strange. You don't usually get white wax. It's reserved for ceremonial decrees, usually death announcements or retirements involving divine visions. You glance at the author. It's from the Office of Relic Oversight. Oh no, these are the worst. You read the first line, to whom it may eventually concern. That's never good. The scroll describes the ceremonial transfer of a fingertip relic, allegedly belonging to Saint Tryphon, from one chapel to another due to a damp wall. You're required to verify the chain of storage, witness statements, and temperature logs of the reliquary. You look at Gregor. Do we have the storage record logs? He shrugs. Check with the archivist. You shudder. The archivist lives 3 floors below. Nobody knows his real name. He smells like garlic and anxiety. But relic documentation requires a seal of witness, and unfortunately, You're now the witness. You rise slowly, gather the scroll, and descend the spiral staircase toward the undervaults. Each step squeaks in an increasingly alarming tone. By the time you reach the bottom, your ears feel like they've been mildly interrogated. The archivist's room is dim. Candles burn low, and the air smells like ink, old socks, and something you choose not to identify. He appears from the shadows. "What is required?" he says, voice thin as wax thread. You hand him the scroll. He sniffs it, literally. "Acceptable," he murmurs, reaching for a giant, dusty tome labeled Index of Authenticated Body Parts. Vol. 4. He scribbles something, then stamps the corner with a faded seal of an eyeball. "Return," he says. You nod and back away carefully. Back at your desk, the sun has shifted. The air feels thicker. You glance up at the ceilings. Several beeswax candles are starting to drip. You reposition your scroll stack. You finish sealing the relic transfer document with a slightly trembling hand. White wax, precise pressure. The imprint is perfect. You slide it into the to-be-forgotten box. That's the unofficial name. Officially, it's low-priority archives with no expected follow-up. And with that, you exhale deeply. 1 hour down, 10 more to go. Your stomach growls gently, as if trying to lodge a formal complaint with the emperor himself. It's midday, officially known in chancery speak as repast interval B, and unofficially as lentil o'clock. You reach for the clay bowl on your desk. It's lukewarm now. The lentils have congealed slightly into a soft brown heap, dotted with 2 shriveled parsley flakes for decoration, maybe flavor. Hard to say. You poke at it with a wooden spoon and take a bite. Not bad. Not good. Just ... there, like most things in your life. Gregor slurps his lentils loudly beside you. This batch is less vinegary than usual. He mumbles through a mouthful. You nod, mouth too full to respond. Across the room, someone lets out a satisfied sigh that turns into a cough. You hear the distinct clink of a chipped clay bowl being returned to the table. Lunch is always a communal silence punctuated by the occasional throat clear, spoon scrape, or philosophical musing about retirement at age 65, which, in your line of work, might as well be sainthood. While you eat, you overhear the usual midday gossip swirl around. Did you hear Melanian got to stamp with silver wax last week? Only because she's helping the relics department. Still, she's moving up. No one moves up. They just change desks. You're too focused on the slightly overcooked barley crust at the bottom of your bowl, a delicacy if you tilt your head and squint. Historians still argue whether Byzantine office lunches were strictly regulated or loosely tolerated. What's undeniable is that food served more as a time marker than nourishment. Eat too fast, and you had to return to work early. Eat too slow, and your supervisor assumed you were plotting reform. The candle clock beside the entrance hisses. Faintly, its wax has nearly burned through the 5th hour. You wipe your spoon, fold it back in your sleeve. and nudge your bowl aside. Gregor leans over. Heard anything from the Department G lately? You shake your head. Department G oversees imperial poultry permits. Last you heard, they were embroiled in a debate over whether swans count as property or divine signs. That was 3 weeks ago. You assume they're still arguing. Someone walks by, holding a tray of half-finished scrolls. You recognize the label, Fiscal Misunderstandings, Sun Intentional, your department's specialty. One scroll slides off the tray and flutters to the floor. You pick it up and read the title. Clarification requested, whether salt counts as grain for taxation purposes. Of course, you add it to your stack because everything eventually becomes your problem. Back at your desk, a faint smell drifts your way, something not quite parchment, not quite sandalwood. You look up. It's the cheese merchant. Technically, his name is Basilios, and he's an economic advisor to the regional guilds. Practically speaking, he's the unofficial provider of lunch, gossip, and the only man bold enough to wear a robe embroidered with dairy cows. He strolls past, nodding, then stops. Gregor, you still miss filing those grain exceptions. Gregor doesn't look up. You still bribing bishops with camembert. Basilios chuckles and walks off, leaving behind a trail of perfume and faint cheddar. You feel the sleepy pool of digestion setting in, but you can't afford to drift. Not now. You open the salt Taz grain scroll. It's oddly written, as if translated from Latin into Greek by someone who only half understood either. There's a paragraph that reads, "In event where crystals are not wheaten, but resemble abundance, shall they be subject to imperial granary dictates." You stare at it for a long moment. You scribble a neutral reply, while the substance in question is not technically botanical. It shares enough properties with taxable goods that its status may be interpreted contextually. Vague enough to deflect blame, specific enough to pass inspection. You seal it in brown wax, the safe color, the color of "I did my job. Please leave me alone." Gregor burps gently and slides a scroll toward you. From legal interpretations, he says, "It's a fun one." You unroll it. A merchant has petitioned the crown for permission to build a second floor on his shop. The current building abuts an old statue of Emperor Heraclius, and the merchant fears the shadow of the new floor may symbolically obscure imperial glory. You read it twice. You look at Gregor. He shrugs. Shadow-based zoning disputes. Classic. Third quarter stuff. You write a diplomatic reply. The crown recognizes the symbolic importance of sunlight in civic spaces. Any alteration of public shade must receive appropriate sanctification. You almost add a joke, but think better of it. You seal it. The bowl of lentils on your desk is now dry and cracked at the edges. It looks fossilized. A relic of lunch past. You nudge it off to the side, where it joins 4 other bowls, one from each previous day. You really should return them to the kitchen, but walking there means risking another scroll delivery. Gregor begins humming again. Same tune, still off-key. You join in, softly, just to annoy him. He stops. You're off key. So are you. That's why it works. You both return to your parchment. The clock ticks on. Another scroll arrives. The scroll lands with an almost theatrical plop onto your desk. It's thick 5 full pages when unrolled and bound with a ribbon that looks dangerously close to silk. Which means someone with delusions of grandeur wrote it. The ink is dark, bold, and slightly perfumed. You smell lavender. In trouble, Gregor leans over, eyeing the ribbon. Ah, Department B again. You sigh audibly. Department B handles agricultural permits, land boundary disputes, and, unofficially, dramatic overreactions. Their documents always arrive over-formatted and under-edited, like a sermon written by a poet with commitment issues. You untie the ribbon and let the scroll unfurl. The title reads, Urgent Rectification of the Grazing Permit Previously Ratified. Under sunset conditions. You blink sunset conditions. As you read further, it becomes clear. 2 months ago, Department B issued a grazing permit for a hillside village near Nicaea. However, the field in question appears drastically different. In the evening, light leading to confusion over actual usable grazing terrain. The villagers began arguing. Someone fell into a bush. Feelings were hurt. Now, Department B wants you to refile the original permit, issue a sunset-specific footnote clause, and verify whether goats or sheep are more likely to misjudge terrain. Under low visibility, you rub your temples, softly, carefully. The afternoon is only just beginning. You open the cross-reference ledger to find the original scroll. You're in luck. It's stored under environmental ambiguities, livestock, a thick file. You flip past entries like morning dew disputes, shadow-based territorial arguments, and fog versus smoke. A legal distinction. Ah, there it is. The original grazing permit is, predictably, vague. It refers to the western slope as seen under favorable skies. That could mean anything or nothing. Probably both. Historians still argue whether Byzantine bureaucrats genuinely intended their documents to be this poetic, or whether poetic vagueness was just the safest way to avoid responsibility. Either way, the ambiguity persists. Like mildew, you draft a revised clause. Henceforth, the aforementioned terrain shall be considered legally navigable only when illuminated by no fewer than 2 celestial bodies, excluding fireflies. You pause. Add a footnote, clarifying that reflections in ponds do not count as a second source of light. Gregor snorts. You're in rare form today, he says. I had lentils. You sign the scroll, melt the wax screen for land dispute. Again, press the seal. But you're not done. At the bottom of the page, there's a mysterious drawing. A goat, possibly, or a poorly rendered dog with ambitions. Below it, a phrase, field record, drawing B, for illumination clarity. The drawing has no scale, no landmarks, just a blob with 4 legs and a scribbled sun in the corner. You consider drawing a new goat, but decide against it. Your goat drawing skills peaked in your teens. And this job requires neither talent nor fluently plausible obedience. You write, instead, as per illustration B. Proportions are indicative only, not to scale, and carry no divine connotation. Standard disclaimer. You roll up the scroll, tie it with a fresh cord, and place it in the to be filed under mild confusion box. At that moment, a courier enters. He's out of breath. Always a bad sign. He holds 3 scrolls, each marked with a red ribbon, the official color of immediate reprocessing due to clerical error. You recognize the writing. Department B, again. Gregor lets out a theatrical groan. What is happening in there? You unroll the first scroll. It's a correction to a correction of a fiscal estimate that was already marked as hypothetical. The numbers don't match. There's a chart that doesn't correspond to anything. The tax rate has been written in what appears to be musical notation. You scan the second scroll. It's a request for clarification on how many grazing permits one shepherd can hold, assuming dual citizenship between 2 semi-independent townships, neither of which recognizes the other's census data. You check the third scroll. It's a poem, or at least it begins with rhyming couplets and references to wheat fields. You read aloud, "O blessed goat, who grazes there, upon the hill with gentle air." You look at Gregor. Is this a policy draft? He shrugs. Maybe it's a morale initiative. You skim the rest. Somewhere in stanza 4, it transitions abruptly into permit guidelines. You grab a red wax stick and slap on your lowest priority. Seal. Filed interpretive review pending. That buys you 3 to 6 weeks of breathing room, just as you're sliding the poetic scroll into the tray. A voice calls from across the room. MELANIA. Double quotes. Hey, anyone seen the grazing dispute from Nicaea, version 3? Gregor yells back, already updated and sunset certified. A pause. Did you include the goat drawing? You and Gregor glance at each other. Yes, you both lie. Across the room, silence. Then, a satisfied grunt. You both exhale. The candle clock hisses. Afternoon has officially begun its descent into that golden, glowy, but ultimately misleading light that tricks you into thinking the day is almost over. It's not. You glance at your incoming tray. More scrolls are arriving. Gregor hums. A tune that might be about goats. Or doom. Probably both. You unroll the next scroll. You unroll the next scroll carefully, already half expecting it to contain something absurd, like a request to relocate a statue, because it causes pigeons to congregate in symbolic patterns. But this one surprises you. It's simple. Title. Proposed methods of counting chickpeas for taxation. Ah, classic Byzantine innovation meets agricultural micromanagement. You skim the body of the scroll. A provincial tax official in Cilicia has proposed a new system. Rather than weighing sacks of chickpeas, they want to count them individually by hand to ensure equity across regions where chickpeas vary in density. You stare at the scroll. for a long time, then reread it. Gregor peeks over. Is that the chickpea one? You nod. They're suggesting one tax assistant count every single chickpea. Gregor winces. They tried that last year with lentils, ended in tears and arthritis. You glance back down. The proposal includes a table of average chickpea weights, a diagram of a counting station, and a footnote suggesting that seasonal interns could be trained in bean verification protocols. Historians still argue whether Byzantine agricultural reforms were genuinely aimed at fairness or simply kept bureaucrats too busy to rebel. But one thing's clear: no empire ever micromanaged legumes quite like this one. You begin drafting your reply. First, the polite disclaimer: we recognize the ingenuity of Cilician tax practices and applaud the pursuit of precision. Then, the gentle rejection, however. Imperial policy maintains volumetric measurement as standard, owing to efficiency concerns, hand fatigue, and prior legal precedent. You add a third line, just for bureaucratic flair, in rare cases. Individual counting may be permitted for ceremonial batches or festival stockpiles, provided ecclesiastical approval is obtained. You seal it with brown wax. Chickpeas fall squarely in non-urgent fiscal goods. Gregor chuckles. That's the third chickpea proposal this month. Is there ... a bean movement happening? You shrug. Maybe the peasants are restless. You get up to stretch. Across the room, Melania is arguing with a courier over ink shortages. The courier gestures wildly at his satchel, which contains precisely nothing. You hear the phrase budgetary alchemy float across the room. You sit back down. Another scroll awaits. This one bears the black wax seal of Department K, Domestic Comfort Regulations. Their motto: softer sleep, stronger empire. It's embroidered on their robes. You once saw one of them restuffing a pillow with military precision. You unroll the scroll. It's a request to approve a standardized mattress stuffing ratio for monks in urban monasteries. Apparently, there have been drowsiness disparities between regions. You blink. This is serious. The scroll includes test results: goose down versus straw, feather distribution density, and a section labeled preliminary snore analysis. Gregor leans over again. Please tell me they sent the snore chart. You flip to the back. There it is. A carefully labeled drawing of a monk's head, complete with sound wave lines, and a note that says, volume, estimate, 1/3 thunderclap. You stifle a laugh. You begin drafting your response. First, the formality. His imperial softness appreciates efforts toward monastic restfulness. Then, a clarification. While uniform mattress standards are encouraged, regional materials may be substituted if sleep quality meets ecclesiastical minimums. You add a signature flourish. Please advise if monk exhibits signs of overslumbering, for example, dream visions, mistimed vespers. You reach for the wax. This one's tricky, technically. Comfort regulations fall under domestic rituals, which use deep orange wax. You don't have deep orange wax. You hold up a finger. Call across the room. Melanian, do we still have any orange wax? She tosses you a half-used stick with a shrug, stented and smells faintly like oranges, possibly on purpose. You melt it, seal the scroll. Perfect. You stack it on the to-be reviewed by someone with cushier robes tray. Next up, a scroll marked in blue ink. That's unusual. Blue is rarely used. Signals documents that are experimental, pending ritual review. You unroll it slowly. Inside, a proposal to tax musical notes. You pause. Read it again. Yes, the document proposes a levy on any song performed in public. That includes more than 5 distinct notes. The rationale: complexity taxes the soul and distracts from divine focus. You raise your eyebrows. Even by Byzantine standards, this is melodic nonsense. You read on. The proposal includes examples. Chants equals exempt. Hymns equals limited to. 6 notes. Ballads equals taxable. There's even a line item for instruments. Lute strings taxed per octave. You can't help it. You laugh. Gregor looks over. That good. They want to tax music. He shakes his head. Next thing you know, they'll be taxing silence. You grab your quill. Your reply begins, while the empire appreciates moral clarity through sound regulation. The enforcement of note-based taxation may prove discordant. You include a footnote. Also, the taxation of humming is discouraged owing to measurement ambiguities. You seal it in blue waxware and mildly theatrical. You glance back at your desk. A fresh scroll has arrived. Title: Wool dye approval, request, color. Seafoam, regret. You sigh. That one can wait. Gregor hums a new tune. 7 notes this time. You slide him a look. That'll be too solid, you mutter. He grins. The clock ticks forward. The scroll, labeled Wool dye approval, request color, seafoam regret, lies in front of you, radiating indecision. The name alone makes you suspicious. Seafoam regret sounds like something concocted by a poet-turned-dyer with unresolved feelings for a naval officer. You unroll it. The request comes from a textile guild in Thessaloniki. They claim the color has spiritual significance, representing penitence after maritime indulgence, and they wish to approve for official ecclesiastical vestments during minor fasting holidays. You blink twice, then read it again, apparently. The dye is unstable in sunlight, turns gray in cold weather, and has been described by one bishop as what shame would look like if it were soggy. Gregor leans over. Seafoam. What? Regret. He squints. Wasn't that the name of that failed opera last spring? No, that was Brineful Longing. Ah, you read on. The dyers insist that the pigment aligns with the emotional hue of psalms recited during naval processions. There's even a sample swatch pinned to the scroll. You touch it. It feels damp. Somehow, even though it isn't. You draft a reply, while the empire commends artistic fervor in textile innovation. Seafoam regret shall be restricted to informal vestments. until such time as its hue stabilizes under varying barometric conditions. You add a second note, advisable to consult with Department of Weather-Responsive Fabrics before wide distribution. You seal it with dark green wax, used exclusively for aesthetic debates of questionable urgency. Next scroll, a formal petition from a fishmonger's guild in Antioch. Title: On the Spiritual Implications of Selling Eels on Tuesdays. You rub your eyes. The petition argues that eel sales conducted on Tuesdays correlate with increased maritime accidents. There's no dated anecdotal evidence, and one ominous dream, recounted in terrifying detail by a man named Fusios. The scroll includes a crude drawing of an eel shaped like a question mark, and a footnote warning that the fishmonger's wife has seen signs. You write, the Office of Mercantile Rituals recommends no formal eel sale restrictions be imposed unless divinely confirmed. Fishmongers are advised to proceed with reverence and proper drainage. Seal, blue wax, because dreams were involved. Gregor glances up. You know what this means. Right. What? Next week, we're getting a scroll about herring. You nod solemnly. It's always herring season somewhere. Just then, a shadow crosses your desk. It's the supervisor. She doesn't speak, just drops a thick folder labeled "Backlogged Urgencies, Do Not Panic," and walks off. You wait until she's gone. Then open it. Inside, 10 scrolls. All different colors. Some old, others newly minted. One smells faintly of incense. Another is wrapped in fine thread and labeled in Latin. You sigh, because Latin means diplomacy. You open the Latin one first. A letter from the Western Empire, requesting clarification on your empire's stance toward the calendrical reforms proposed by the Bishop of Ravenna. The reform involves removing 1 week per year and redistributing its days across winter solstices. You squint. Gregor peers over your shoulder. They want to reshuffle time, apparently. The scroll includes a diagram titled Temporal Redistribution Model Preliminary. It looks like someone's tried to reinvent the wheel using cheese wedges. Historians still argue whether this reform was ever seriously considered or if it was simply a test to see how long it would take Byzantines to respond. You pen your reply in deliberately precise Greek, laced with polite bafflement. While we appreciate temporal innovation, the current calendar has adequately guided planting, fasting, and bath schedules for generations. We shall observe your progress with interest from a stable chronological distance. Seal, diplomatic gray, rare, dignified, a little smug. Next scroll, a list of approved bird species for urban fountains. You groan, the fountain bird. Dilemma, again. This list is from the Office of Ornamental Hydrology. They are extremely opinionated. Apparently, sparrows are too chaotic, storks are divisive, and geese are outright banned after the incident in Mira. You scan the margins. Someone's written, consider owls, nocturnal ambience. You reply, owls may be suitable provided nocturnal bathing is discouraged and silence maintained. Sparrows may remain in unofficial capacity. Geese are permanently excluded. Seal, white wax, tagged, avian, exceptions. Gregor, who has lived through 3 bird-related memos this month, just murmurs, "Never again." You agree? You roll your shoulders. Candlelight flickers across the stone floor now, casting long golden shadows. The light hits your inkpot just right, creating a glimmer that, for a moment, makes you think of the sea. You sigh. A soft one that doesn't echo. Next scroll is small, neat, tied with a silk thread. Inside, a personal request. An aging clerk from Cappadocia wants permission to retire early and spend his remaining days copying poetry on sheepskin. He's attached 3 samples of his calligraphy, and they're beautiful, flowing, elegant, reverent. He's requested to keep his imperial desk. You read it twice. Gregor notices your stillness. You okay? You nod, then write, "Request approved." Let the desk travel with him. It has served enough emperors for 1 lifetime. You don't seal this one. You wrap it in cloth, mark it direct dispatch, and call over the youngest courier. Deliver. This one, yourself, you tell him, and walk carefully. This scroll deserves it. He nods. You watch him leave. Then, quietly, you smile. The candle burns lower. More scrolls arrive. The next scroll arrives tied with rough twine and a slightly burnt edge, smelling faintly of smoke and honey. Not an unusual combination, considering it's from Department P, Provincial Infrastructure and Pastry Regulation. You break the seal. Carefully read, wax this time, oddly intense, for a matter that seems, at first, to be about bridge maintenance. But the title gives you pause, clarification. Regarding the correct sequence of toll collection and pastry distribution during equinox festivals, you don't even blink anymore. Apparently, in a small town just south of Nicomedia, the local toll station shares a narrow walkway with the Bakery Guild's holiday pie stand. During the spring equinox, when celebratory spiced tarts are freely distributed, travelers have been known to bypass tolls under the excuse of tart-induced distraction. One official claims this has led to fiscal leakage. It's a blessing. A third suggests simply relocating the tart table 5 feet to the left. You skim the rest. You're not sure how to interpret it, as it's been drawn in what appears to be blackberry jam. Gregor sees it and mutters, "That's how the cherry riot started." You don't ask. Historians still argue whether festivals caused more bureaucratic headaches than benefits. On the one hand, they raised public morale. On the other, they produced scrolls like this sticky, sweet, and entirely unhelpful. You penned your reply, while the imperial heart applauds festive generosity. Toll duties remain sacred. We recommend placing pastries after the toll checkpoint, ideally on a raised dais to avoid jam-related obfuscation. Seal, amber wax for food-adjacent infrastructure dilemmas. Gregor leans back. You think they'll actually move the tart table. You raise an eyebrow. You ever try arguing with a pie vendor mid-blessing? He grins. Fair. Next scroll. Heavy parchment, bold script. Very official title. Emergency clarification. If a goat enters a public bath without permission, who is liable? You close your eyes. The scroll is from the city of Ephesus. Apparently, a goat belonging to a soap merchant wandered into the public therme during women's hour. It caused mild chaos, trampled several towels, and allegedly chewed the corner off an icon of Saint Basil. Nay, stifle a laugh. The city magistrate is unsure whether the incident constitutes a breach of public modesty laws, an act of domestic negligence, or simply the goat's own spiritual curiosity. You write back, in cases where livestock enters sacred or semi-sacred spaces uninvited, responsibility lies with the owner, unless the animal demonstrates autonomous intention. For example, use of designated entryways. Recommend goat be blessed and bathhouse floor resanded. Seal blue wax with a goat hoof insignia. Across the room, Melanian sneezes loudly. The kind of sneeze that ends conversations. Gregor calls out, Saint Basil, forgive us, it's happening again. Melanian groans, not my fault. The scrolls are dusty. You check the air. She's right. The more obscure the scroll, the older the dust. This one, from Department X Experimental Economics and Occult Agriculture's practically a cloud. In parchment form, you hold your breath and unroll it. Title: Proposal to use beekeeping as a model for urban bureaucracy. Oh dear, you skim. The theory, proposed by a monk scribe who spent too much time in apiaries, argues that each government office could mimic a beehive cell. Scribes equals drones, supervisors equals queen bees, scrolls equals pollen. The metaphor goes ... far. There are diagrams, charts, a hymn to bees. And, at the bottom, a sealed vial of waxy yellow goo labeled Model Office, Honey, Do Not Consume. You pretend not to see it. Your response, while we salute the metaphorical ambition of beekeeping as a bureaucratic framework, its practical application remains, for now, sweetly theoretical. Recommend continued observation, preferably at a safe distance. You slide the vial into the unexplained substances box. It's getting full. Gregor stands to stretch. You know, I once saw a guy in Treasury try to file a complaint with a pigeon. You don't look up. Did it work? Gregor grins. The pigeon's still waiting for a reply. You glance at the clocked candle, stripping faster now. The sun must be lowering, painting long golden bands across the stone floor. You hear footsteps, some hurrying, others dragging. The shift is turning. Not over yet, but changing. A new scroll arrives, slipped onto your desk without a word. You recognize the binding. It's from the Temple of Wind Records, an obscure meteorological guild with religious overtones. Their requests are always equal parts weather and prophecy. Title: Concerning the east wind and its possible preference for Tuesdays. You close your eyes, breathe deep, and brace yourself. The scroll outlines a series of observations claiming that strong eastern winds arrive more frequently on Tuesdays than other days. The author suspects divine rhythm. There's a table listing wind speeds, cloud shapes, and incidents of spontaneous whistling. They want official recognition of Tuesday as Wind Negotiation Day. You write carefully, while patterns of divine breezes are noted with reverence. Tuesday shall remain unassigned as an imperial wind designation until further correlation is confirmed by less breezy methodology. Seal, lavender wax, rarely used for atmospheric theology. Across the room, someone sneezes again. A flock of pigeons erupts from a nearby ledge. Scroll dust everywhere. You rest your head in your hand, just for a moment. Outside, bells ring once quarter to dusk. Still, a few hours left. Still more scrolls arriving. The bells outside continue to echo softly as the wind changes direction, lifting the corner of your newest scroll before you even touch it. The air smells like dust, ink, and faintly of cum, and someone's probably snaking a second snack behind. The archive wall. You don't blame them. You reach for the latest scroll. The wax is chipped, its emblem faded, but you recognize the seal of Department V, vestimentary exceptions, and formal ceremonial outfits. The last time they wrote, it was to ban sequins in mourning robes. This scroll is titled Appeal for Thee. Inclusion of ceremonial clogs in court processions. You sigh gently. Your hips ache. Your eyes blur. And now you must review a document about wooden shoes. You unroll the scroll. It begins with a lengthy, poetic preamble about the humility of wood against the opulence of tile, followed by 3 diagrams of clogs, one shaped like a fish, one engraved with saints, and one deeply unfortunate hybrid of both. The appeal comes from a regional tailors' guild in Bithynia. They argue that traditional clogs are symbolic of honest origins and spiritual grounding, and thus should be permitted in official court processions, particularly for judges and scribes. You skim the middle of the scroll. There are footnotes citing obscure saints who may or may not have worn clogs. One reference claims Saint Melisios received a vision of legal fairness while his foot was caught in a tree root, thus echoing the essence of wooden footwear. Historians still debate whether such stories were literal or just excuses for poor footwear. No consensus has been reached. You begin to reply, while clogs embody virtues of simplicity and resistance to floor polish. Their acoustical disruption during ceremonial walking remains a concern. Conditional approval granted for use on outdoor stone courtyards, only pending noise level evaluation. You stamp the scroll with a muted purple wax, mildly acceptable fashion deviations. Gregor, from behind his stack, murmurs, "Did you give them clog clearance?" "Only outside," you reply. He chuckles. There goes the silent dignity of the imperial rose garden. Next scroll. This one is oddly smalled, just a single, tightly wound coil with a miniature seal. You unfold it carefully. It's not from any department. It's handwritten. No wax, no flourish. It reads, To whomever reads this, I found an old law in a roof tile. It says that if a man sneezes twice before sunrise, he cannot be legally taxed that day. Is this true? Please advise. Yours, in confusion, Orestes, Bakers. Apprentice, District 3, you stare at it. Gregor notices your expression. Something urgent, just the sneeze clause again. He whistles. That old tile rumor still going. Apparently, you scribble a reply on a new scrap of parchment. Thank you for your inquiry. The law in question has been reinterpreted as metaphorical. Double sneezes at dawn are now considered omens, not tax exemptions. Continue baking, and bless you. You fold it, stamp it with soft gray wax. Unofficial citizen queries. Next scroll is heavy, too heavy. You open it and discover not just parchment, but a stone chip enclosed in cloth. That's never a good sign. The scroll reads, Report on statues misinterpreted as new citizens. Oh God. The incident happened in a southern village. A new census clerk mistook several weathered statues of philosophers for actual townspeople. He filed housing permits, distributed bread rations, and even scheduled one for jury duty. You rub your forehead. The scroll includes names. The clerk assigned Heracles P. Stone Body, Irene, the observant, and Gregor C. Tedman, Q. Sigh again. Somewhere between exasperation and admiration. You write, the statues in question are confirmed as non-responsive citizens. Future census procedures should include a gentle prod or inquiry to verify animation. Bread rations may be redirected to actual mouths. You include a footnote. Statue Gregor C. Tedman may remain on local bench as he brings civic serenity. Seal, sandstone wax, kept for architecture-related misidentifications. You glance over your outgoing tray. It's piled high scrolls of every length, color, and level of absurdity. Some will be read immediately. Some will sit in archives for decades. One or two may be rediscovered in future centuries. Mistaken for poetry, another scroll lands on your desk. You pause. This one is marked Return Needs Simplification. Oh no, you open it. It's a reply from Department Y. Youth, Education, and Public Clarity. They've reviewed one of your previous scrolls, an explanation of agricultural levies, and found the language too poetic, insufficiently edible. They want something simpler. For public display, they say, you sigh again. You rewrite the paragraph. Farmers give the empire a share of their crops so that roads can be fixed, soldiers can eat, and festivals can have bread. Done. Seal. Bright orange. Public Clarity Protocol. As the candlelight dims, you hear the first sounds of end of day routines. Benches scraping, sandals shuffling. Someone coughing theatrically to indicate they've done enough for one lifetime. But you're not finished. Last scroll of the hour. Thick, dark parchment. A small label reads, Translation request. Unknown language. Possibly pre-Greek. You open it carefully. Inside is a series of swirling symbols, vaguely reminiscent of a snail race diagram. There's a note found in the ruins of an old bathhouse. No context, maybe curse or recipe. You stare at it. Gregor leans over, sees the symbols. I think that one says, "Don't step on the tile with a crack," or "Add rosemary before the vinegar." Both sound right. You write your formal reply. The inscription remains open to interpretation. Recommend respectful display in museum or culinary archive. Do not lick. Seal. Deep crimson ritual ambiguity classification. You lean back. Your fingers are ink-stained. Your candle flickers. Outside, the bells ring, again this time low, long, and final. The scrolls will return tomorrow. For now, you rest your quill. The bell's long final note is still fading when you hear the soft clatter of sandals behind you. You turn, slowly. It's Cleon, the night shift scribe. His robe is wrinkled, his hair uncooperative, and he smells faintly of olives and candle. Wax a sure sign he's already been nibbling the leftover offerings from the break table. Cleon nods in that way. Night workers do. Not exactly greeting, more like shared resignation. You slide over the pending but harmless tray, and he grunts approval. But you're not off the hook just yet. A courier you've never seen before, child. No older than 12, peers, panting, holding a scroll with gold trim and trembling. Arms, priority dispatch, he whispers. You thank him with half a fig from your desk drawer. You eye the scroll with suspicion. Gold-trimmed scrolls mean only one thing: imperial interest. You unfurl it slowly and read, report, request, catalog of unusual sleeping habits among provincial officials. You stare at it for a moment, then read it again, slowly. Surely, this is a joke, but knew it's signed with the unmistakable flourish of His Serene Highness's domestic secretary, the man in charge of the Emperor's private curiosities. Last month, he sent a note asking whether candles burned slower when exposed to lute music. You had to write an entire report on wax and acoustics. Apparently, the Emperor now wishes to know how his officials sleep. You roll your shoulders and reach for your pen. You begin drafting in response to His Serene Highness's inquiry. We present the initial findings concerning the slumber patterns, rituals, and innovations of provincial administrators. From there, you list known behaviors from across the empire, more baffling than the last. In Pontus, the regional tax assessor sleeps inside a hollowed amphora lined with goat fleece, claiming it improves numerical dream recall. A magistrate in Crete is known to tie his left ankle to the leg of a desk to prevent wandering judgments during sleep. In Dalmatia, local legend insists the archivist only sleeps upright, leaning against a scroll shelf, murmuring taxation rates through his dreams. A city clerk in Sinope has a documented case of sleep memorization. He wakes, quoting entire legal codes, but only the sections involving fisheries. You include a note. Historians still argue whether these behaviors stem from professional devotion, dietary side effects, or the subtle madness cultivated by scroll exposure. You finish the report with a sentence, both reverent and evasive. We remain committed to further observation of these nocturnal peculiarities. Should His Majesty desire an ongoing account of our empire's sleeping minds, seal, royal blue wax, scented, slightly perfumed, Gregor peers over. Now lazily biting into an olive pit, the fishery guy again. He asks, still dreaming of trout regulations. You reply. Gregor nods, solemnly. Legend. Another courier arrives not with a scroll this time, but a bundle, cloth-wrapped, small. You raise an eyebrow as he sets it down. From Department S, he mutters. Sensory regulation and smell. Of course, inside the bundle is a scroll and 3 vials of liquid. One's green, one pale yellow, and one, terrifyingly, black dot. The scroll reads, Trial results. Use of scented air in archive rooms to promote efficiency. You already know this won't end well. Apparently, the department ran olfactory experiments in an archive wing. The green vial, spring meadow parchment, allegedly made scribes more productive. The yellow, citrus, clarity, caused excessive foot tapping. The black, unnamed, led to a heated debate about whether squirrels had souls. You write, while the empire welcomes sensory innovation, further testing of the black vial is suspended pending divine clarification. Green variant may be applied in moderation, provided windows are opened monthly. You label the black vial, do not open, and drop it into the deepest drawer of your desk, beneath several scroll weights and a tin of stale dates. You check. The room, quiet now. Cleon scribbles steadily across the hall. Melanian's gone. Gregor hums something that sounds vaguely like an anthem or a soup recipe. You glance at your odd cases pile. One more before your break. You pick up a scroll marked Department D, decorative symbols and meaningful doodles. You stifle a sigh inside, a formal request to standardize the flourishes drawn at the ends of official signatures. One scribe is allegedly drawing miniature ducks. Another is accused of including suns with expressive faces. There's even a diagram ranking popular doodles by frequency and confusion level. Ducks with hats top the list, followed by angry sun and ambiguous serpents. You pen a careful reply, while personal expression in signature strokes is tolerated. Doodles that suggest animal consciousness or divine commentary should be discouraged. Standard spirals and stars remain preferred. Seal, dusty bronze wax, reserved for aesthetic enforcement. Gregor peers over, still banning ducks. Only the ones with accessories. He nods. Shame. You sit back and stretch, bones creaking. The candle is nearly gone now. Scrolls dwindle. For a moment, the entire office is quiet. You hear a pigeon settle on the windowsill. The night wind nudges it open, just a crack. The flame flutters. Ink dries. You roll your shoulders, reach for another scroll, because the work, like the empire, never truly sleeps. The next scroll feels strangely cool to the touch, even in the warm, slightly stuffy air of the archive chamber. You turn it over, no wax seal, no insignia. Just faint black ink, labeling it from Department Q. Quotidian habits and domestic rituals. You already know this will be equal parts peculiar and painfully detailed. You break the twine and unroll it. The title reads, Evaluation Request, Regional Tooth Cleaning Rituals and Their Spiritual Appropriateness. Of course, you begin reading. Through an impressively thorough survey of how different provinces within the empire clean their teeth, most notably before religious services. There are notes on reed stick polishing, salt paste, gargling, ash brushing, and even sun-gazing, purification, which you're pretty sure is just an excuse to stand. Outside squinting, each entry includes whether the method is believed to offend or soothe divine sensibilities. And several scroll contributors claim their ancestors received minor visions during dental routines. One even argues that chewing figs counteracts the moral decay caused by lying. Historians still argue whether these rituals evolved from genuine hygienic intent or were simply another method to ritualize the mundane. After all, nothing says piety like spitting into a sanctified clay jar. You draft your response. The empire acknowledges the importance of oral rituals in spiritual preparation. Regional practices may continue, provided no ingredients produce visions, spontaneous foaming, or the illusion of additional teeth. You consider a footnote, then decide against it. This one is best left bland. You seal it with neutral beige wax. Civic routines, mild. Gregor returns from a short walk, a leftover pastry in one hand. Tooth debates, again. Salt or ash, this time. He takes a bite. Ash wins. Always does. You don't respond. You're too focused on the next scroll, which has arrived, tucked inside a large piece of folded vellum. As though ashamed of its own contents, it's marked, compiled by request of Department C, Zones of Confusion. Oh no, this department exists solely to document areas of Byzantine law that no longer make sense to anyone. The scroll is titled, For Contradictory Edicts Regarding Boat Ownership in Landlocked Provinces. You take a breath, apparently. For imperial edicts issued decades apart suggest that citizens in regions without access to rivers, lakes, or seas must one own a boat for civic duty. 3. Build model boats to meet tax quotas. And for neither confirm nor deny the existence of boats, the scroll ends with a simple plea. Please clarify. You write slowly, carefully in landlocked provinces. Citizens may fulfill boating obligations by constructing symbolic vessels no larger than a loaf of bread. These shall be exempt from fire inspections, but must not resemble furniture. You add, Department Z may consider archiving conflicting edicts under category legal ghosts. Seal, ash-colored wax. Used for historical contradictions still enforced by accident. Gregor reads, over your shoulder. Symbolic boats, dude. Be surprised how many legal loopholes you can sail through on a metaphor. The next scroll is unusually thick. You unroll it, revealing a beautifully illustrated guide from the Department of Festive Geometry. You smile. These people take diagrams very seriously. Title: Standardizing the Radius of Bread Circles at Communal Spring Festivals. You look at the first diagram. It shows a precisely measured loaf circular, labeled in cubits, with an arrow indicating bite flow direction. Apparently, discrepancies in bread circumference have led to disputes over fairness during ritual bread-breaking ceremonies. One official claims a flatter loaf suggests emotional apathy. You stifle a laugh. You read on. One region cuts loaves into perfect hexagons. Another insists on leaving the bread uncut, requiring ceremonial, communal tearing, which surprisingly leads to a lot of shouting and uneven pieces. You reply, let the diameter of festival loaves remain flexible within the span of a scribe's outstretched hand. What matters is intention, not geometry. However, avoid overly sharp corners. They are not festive. Seal, golden brown wax, used for anything involving bread, song, or both. Gregor speaks through a yawn. Imagine writing imperial policy about crusts. You look him dead in the eye. Crusts hold empires together. He snorts. A soft tap interrupts your moment. He holds a small scroll tucked inside a pouch labeled Emergency, Cultural Panic. You unroll it quickly. It's a dispatch from a frontier town. Apparently, during a reenactment of a minor historical battle, a local performer got carried away and declared himself emperor. Some villagers cheered. Others sent this scroll. You blink. He's calling himself Demetrius, the extremely temporary. The question, is this treason? You write carefully. Unless Demetrius has issued coins, raised a banner, or modified local taxation, he may be treated as an enthusiastic amateur. Encourage him to end his reign with a feast, not a coup. You pause, then add, send cake, not guards. Seal, silver gray, wax, sealed for non-violent, false emperors. Gregor says, that's the third Demetrius this year. You nod. This one has the best title, though the candle flickers low again. You place your fingers on the next scroll, but don't open it just yet. Instead, you listen. Nothing. The deep, sacred quiet of bureaucratic after hours. The only sound is the tick of dripping wax and the steady scratching of Cleon's pen in the corner. You stretch, crack your knuckles. Then, you open the scroll. You open the next scroll with the cautious optimism of someone who once unrolled a tax law only to find an angry wasp inside. Luckily, this one is sting-free. At the top, an elegant header reads, Request for sanctioned nap intervals during archive hours. You raise an eyebrow. This scroll comes from the Imperial Sleep Studies, Comedia's surprisingly well-funded department whose last major contribution was a 50-page treatise on the benefits of dream-led diplomacy. It had footnotes. In verse, the petition argues that scribes and low-level officials should be permitted brief, scheduled naps in designated sleep alcoves between the 6th and 9th hours of the day. Attached is a hand-drawn floor plan that converts old record closets into nap nooks, complete with ventilation diagrams and suggested lullaby rotations. Some of the arguments are compelling: improved memory, reduced scroll smudging, fewer incidents of sleepwalking into the wax vat. Others, less so. One official claims he receives divine visions after precisely 11 minutes of sleep, but only if he dozes on imperial linen. Historians still debate whether structured napping contributed meaningfully to Byzantine productivity or just created more scrolls for you to read. You draft your reply. The empire acknowledges the mind's need for renewal. Trial nap intervals may be implemented in archive branches, provided one no snoring exceeds the volume of a light cough. 2 wax fires are extinguished beforehand, and 3 lullabies avoid politically sensitive lyrics. Seal, pale green, wax, soothed. For rest and semi-sleep affairs, Gregor glances over. "Don't even think about it," you reply. Next scroll. This one's wrapped in deep purple thread and smells faintly of myrrh and frustration. It's from the Office of Liturgical Ambiguities. Title: Dispute over the correct direction to swing. Incense in narrow sanctuaries. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and mentally prepare yourself. Apparently, in cramped temple spaces, incense-swinging acolytes have begun to argue over whether clockwise or counterclockwise motions are holier. One priest insists that counterclockwise encourages humility, while another claims clockwise mimics the celestial rotation of heavenly spheres. One overly poetic subdeacon even refers to clockwise swinging as summoning the mercy spiral. The scroll includes a miniature sensor diagram and a list of churches with insufficient clearance for full swings, resulting in numerous minor burns and at least one singed beard. You respond, the sacredness lies not in direction, but in devotion. Where space is limited, gentle side-to-side wafting may replace full circular motions. Mercy spirals are left to the divine. Seal, dark violet, wax used for spatially liturgical concerns. Gregor peers over again. Was that beard guy the one who tried to light incense with a pastry candle? Yes, stew smells like apricots in that chapel. The next scroll is unexpectedly tiny. You almost miss it, tucked beneath a stack of parchment strips. It's marked Personal Inquiry, unofficial. You unfurl it. Dearest scribes, if a person accidentally eats a ceremonial fig intended for a priestly offering, but does so in ignorance and hunger, is their soul in jeopardy? Asking for a friend. Signed, anonymous but regretful. You smile for the first time in hours. You write your reply with care. The gods of fig trees are merciful. If the fig was eaten in ignorance and sincere hunger, no harm is done. Let your friend rest easy and perhaps leave a plum next time in its place. Seal, honey-colored wax. Category: fruit-related moral uncertainty. Gregor murmurs, that better be real forgiveness. Figs are expensive. You shrug. Redemption tastes best when sweet. You reach for the next scroll. It's bound in stiff leather and smells of seawater and bureaucracy. Rare but memorable combination. You unroll it and see it's from the Naval Etiquette Subcommittee. Title: Clarification of proper bowing angles. When addressing seabirds during ceremonial launches, you rub your temples. Apparently, during the launching of a new imperial trireme, it is customary to release a seabird, often a gull or cormorant, as a symbol of divine guidance. Recent confusion has arisen over whether officials should bow to the bird, and if so, how deeply. One naval captain insists that a full 90-degree bow shows humility to nature. Another claims that bowing to birds risks being mistaken. For seed throwing, you scribble. A respectful nod shall suffice when addressing seabirds at launch. Full bows reserved for humans, deities, and exceptionally wise tortoises. You stamp it with marine blue wax. Ceremonial naval symbolism. Gregor's laugh echoes lightly. Exceptionally wise tortoises. You never know who's watching. The candle beside you flickers, melting into the ring of wax drippings that now resembles a small volcano. You lean back, quite done. Yet, a final scroll for the hour arrives, carried by Cleon with an apologetic shrug. You open it. Proposal. Moonlight readings for official documents to enhance symbolic clarity. You sigh, apparently. The astronomers at the Imperial Observatory have proposed that certain types of documents, particularly those relating to fate, inheritance, and love, should be read only under full moonlight to ensure cosmic alignment. They've attached a lunar calendar with optimal document viewing nights highlighted in gold ink. They even include quotes from citizens who claim that moonlight helped them finally understand Clause 7b of the Marriage Restoration Edict. You reply, while lunar ambience may enhance emotional resonance, official documents remain binding in both daylight and moonlight. Citizens may interpret by candle, sun, or moon as desired, provided the ink remains legible. Wax used sparingly for celestial bureaucratic interpretations. You place the scroll in the outgoing basket, lean back, and stare at the ceiling. Soft voices, flickering shadows, and the ever-swirling dust of 10,000 decisions fill the room. The scrolls will keep coming tomorrow, but tonight, for a little while, your pen may rest. Outside, the moon rises, a soft, coin-sized glow, peeking through the high, clear-story windows. Its light pools faintly across the floor, mixing with the dim candle flicker as you unroll your next scroll. It's an odd one stitched at the top, not sealed. You tug gently and find a label: Department R, Rodent Affairs and Domestic Intrusions. You already know this will be unforgettable. The title reads, Formal Complaint Regarding a Squirrel Who Has Claimed Residency in the East Wing Archive. You sit up straighter. The scroll outlines an escalating situation. A squirrel described as suspiciously intelligent and possibly literate has been spotted repeatedly stealing parchment scraps, nesting inside a ceiling cornice, and once sitting motionless on a bust of Emperor Heraclius for over an hour. The complaint notes that several scribes now refuse to retrieve scrolls from the eastern shelf, citing the unblinking. One particularly alarmed official suggests the squirrel might be a reincarnated tax assessor. You rub your temples. Historians still argue whether Byzantine rodents were feared for symbolic reasons or just terrible at social cues. You reply, the empire respects all creatures, but document theft even by fuzzy paws cannot be tolerated. Recommend humane relocation of the rodent in question, preferably to a less symbolically charged bust. Seal, soft brown, wax, used for animal-adjacent, bureaucratic disruptions. Gregor raises his head, eyes gleaming. Is it the squirrel again? You nod, still guarding the Heraclius bust, allegedly. He grins. He'll be emperor by next week. You reach for another scroll, but this one's different. It's wrapped in silk and smells faintly of lavender, rare combination. Reserved for Department A, antiquated social practices. You blink. Apparently, an aristocratic household in the hills of Lydia has revived a pre-Christian custom of gently tossing a plum at a guest's feet to signify welcome, spiritual openness, and, oddly, a desire for joint investment in canal construction. They now request formal approval to include the ritual during official receptions. Attached is a detailed diagram of correct plum arc, acceptable firmness range, and a list of plum-related omens. For example, catching the plum equals mutual fortune. Stepping on it equals mild betrayal. You're right, plum tossing, while charming, should be conducted outdoors and at angles unlikely to strike foreheads or lead to public slipping. Permission granted for households with trained fruit handlers. Seal, plum-colored, wax, used exclusively for revived traditions and edible greetings. Gregor mutters, what's next? Peach duels. They're already doing that in Galatia. You deadpan. He laughs. Then Anaka, gentle one, echoes through the archive. You turn. It's a monk from the Department of Scribal Ethics. Holding a scroll tightly with both hands as if it might explode. He bows, whispers, this, ... Arrived from the northern frontier. It concerns dreams. You nod, take the scroll, and thank him. Inside, a dream recorded in the village of Carpassos, believed to contain divine fiscal guidance. You raise an eyebrow. Apparently, an elderly woman dreamed she was visited by a glowing goat who told her that tax assessments for farms with precisely 9 chickens should be waived every third winter moon. She awoke, wrote it down, and convinced 3 local tax collectors to submit it for review. There's even a drawing of the goat radiant, majestic, wearing tiny sandals. You consider your reply for a long moment. Eventually, you write, while the empire respects visions, policy shall not be enacted solely on hoofed apparitions. However, as an act of cultural curiosity, Department M may observe further dreams in the area. Seal, translucent ivory, wax, used for dream-induced economic suggestions. You genuinely hope someone interviews. The goat again. You reach for the next scroll. It's covered in small prints of inky fingers. Someone clearly handled this after eating. You wipe your own fingers with a cloth and open it. Title: Emergency Clarification. Is it permissible to name a child after a scroll? You blink this one, comes from a family in Thessalonica who, after surviving a particularly brutal storm, named their newborn Edictus, claiming the child was born just as they reached shelter in the municipal hall beneath. A framed decree about turnip storage. They now seek approval for the name's legitimacy and possible symbolic registration under document-inspired monikers. You stare at the scroll. Then, your reply, names inspired by civic documents are allowed, though moderation is encouraged. Recommend a middle name that is not also a shelf label. Edictus is permissible, provided no siblings are named footnote or appendix. Seal, pearl blue wax, naming traditions and legislative influence. Gregor eyes your grin. What now? A baby named after the turnip decree. He laughs so hard his chair creaks. And then, another scroll. This one is trembling slightly. You realize it's not the scroll, it's the courier's hand. She's young, nervous, and holding a box with it. You open the scroll first. Department T, Theatrical Oversight Incident Report. An entire audience believed they'd attended a real trial, apparently. A traveling theater group performed a reenactment of a tax fraud, hearing with such dry precision that attendees began filing appeals afterward. One man tried to confess to a crime just to appear in the sequel. You rub your forehead, your ply, while we applaud dramatic realism. All traveling performances involving court procedures must now hang a visible sign reading, "Not illegally." Binding experience. Seal, burgundy, WAX, performative misunderstandings. Inside the box, a small gavel mailed in by a boy who thought it would help lighten his father's sentence. You keep it. The candle gives a final flicker. Only one scroll left. You reach for it. You unwrap the final scroll with a sense of ceremony. After all, it survived the long night alongside you. It's marked in clean, practiced handwriting. Department C, ceremonial errors and unfortunate coincidences. Incident, the emperor's speech scroll was swapped with a recipe for fish stew. Ah, this is going to be good. The scroll recounts an event in the capital square 2 weeks prior. The emperor, intending to deliver an impassioned speech on trade reforms and agricultural subsidies, instead read aloud a meticulous, flour-dusted recipe for festive fisherman's stew with lentils and preserved lemon. Reportedly, he read it with conviction. Worse, no one realized until the phrase, fold in chopped fennel and simmer until emotionally translucent, caused a collective pause. Several courtiers later claimed it was a metaphor. One senator wept. A few chefs declared it the greatest culinary endorsement in imperial history. A second scroll, attached with string, notes that the actual speech was found beneath a pile of invoices, still warm from being used as a trivet. You respond while stirring. The speech failed to address key legislative priorities. All ceremonial scrolls shall henceforth bear spice-resistant seals and avoid kitchens after the 5th hour. The recipe, however, may be archived under civic nourishment. Seal, saffron yellow. Wax used for crossovers between cuisine and statecraft. Gregor sees your expression, that the stew speech. You nod. Apparently, it made 3 people convert to vegetarianism. Did you archive the recipe? I made a copy for the break room. He grins. The room has emptied. Candles now form tiny puddles. Cleon's head is resting on a ledger, unmoving. The wind through the window has settled into a gentle hush. You stretch once, slowly. Every joint creaks in harmony. It's time. You gather your finished scrolls, stack them neatly, and reach for the final documenta, closing log. It's barely used. Just a few signatures, your own among them, marking another full cycle of quiet, necessary absurdity. You dip your pen and sign, just as your candle sputters out. And so, in the near dark, with ink's smudged fingers and the faint aroma of fish stew clinging to the parchment, you end your shift. The empire spins on, and tomorrow, someone will write another scroll about another ceremony, another squirrel, another boat in the mountains. But for now, you rest your head, close your eyes. Let the ink dry, let the wax harden. Let sleep take the bureaucracy with soft, papery hands. Wind dash down 300 words. And now, dear listener, as the scrolls are tucked away and the night settles deep into the corners of the empire, you begin to feel your breath slow, your muscles loosen, your mind gently unravel from the day. Picture yourself in that quiet Byzantine archive, once more its wooden beams creaking faintly with age. The soft scent of wax and old parchment curling in the air. The candlelight has dimmed to embers, casting long shadows on the floor like sleeping cats. Even the most urgent of scrolls now slumbers quietly in their trays. You feel the weight of the quill finally lift from your fingers. No more edicts to review, no more accidental emperors to pardon, no more debates over squirrel sovereignty or plum-tossing precision. Just the rhythmic whisper of the wind through stone corridors. Like a lullaby that's been humming for centuries. Outside, the stars flicker gently over Constantinople's rooftops, and the distant waves slap lazily against the harbor stones. The empire dreams of bureaucrats, of scribes, of ink stains and footnotes and quiet moments of unnoticed brilliance. And so do you. Let your breathing fall into the rhythm of turning pages. Let the quiet absurdity of it all cradle you like a blanket, woven from quills and quiet chuckles. Tomorrow, the scrolls may pile again, but tonight, there's only peace. Sweet dreams, fellow scribe. End of script. Sweet dreams, asterisk, enjoying the soft absurdity of history. If this kind of slow storytelling makes your eyes heavy and your thoughts drift gently through time, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more sleepy minds find their way here. But only subscribe if you truly like what we do. No pressure. No parchment required. And if you're already part of our sleepy little community, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. We love knowing where our scrolls are reaching.